Joining me now, Adil Haq, law professor at Rutgers Law School. With me here on set, Michael Weiss, editor of The Insider and co-author of ISIS, Inside the Army of Terror. So there we have it, Michael, and have had it through today, both sides declaring victory in a war that we don't even know if it's over. But can both sides be right?
Well, we don't even know what the terms are of the ceasefire, right? I mean, Donald Trump has now taken to Truth Social denouncing a CNN report which cited Iranian officials with 10 points of their own, saying this is all fake news and there's a federal investigation into who's leaking this and whatnot. For the last 5 hours or so, it's been a question, is Lebanon on the table in terms of a ceasefire? The Israelis said, nope, it's not. The Americans said, nope, it's not. But the Iranians seem to think it is and are threatening that, you know, if the Israelis don't stop pounding Hezbollah, they might continue hostilities themselves. So I'm as confused as I think everyone else is, to be honest. I know you're not supposed to say that on TV, but, you know, I really don't have any sense of clarity. Trump says that there is, you know, a term sheet that everyone has agreed to, and that's what's going to be negotiated. And, oh, by the way, J.D. Vance is not going to be the one to do it in Islamabad because of security reasons. So it's going to be the, you know, dynamic duo of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. So
are they saying that they're
expendable, but J.D. isn't? They can go to Pakistan, but he can't. And remember, those guys didn't do such a bang-up job with the diplomacy going into this thing. And I don't think the Iranians are going to treat them with anything other than the utmost contempt, right? The juju before the ceasefire was announced was that actually J.D. had volunteered himself to be the interlocutor because the Iranians see him as the isolationist who is anti-war and the guy that they can make a deal with. But Kushner and Witkoff, I don't know. I mean,
Adil, do you have a sense of what's included in this ceasefire and what's not?
No, I think it's pretty clear that there has been miscommunication or lack of clarity. And to be honest, that's not surprising when you try to negotiate a very complex arrangement on a very short timeline. And the negotiators are afraid to even show their faces because they might be assassinated. So this is not how diplomacy is supposed to work. And we see the result is an agreement whose contours are very uncertain and which might collapse at any moment because of that uncertainty.
And yet that has not stopped, Michael, this administration from declaring victory. Let me play a little bit of what Pete Hegseth had to say this morning.
Well, it's always been non-negotiable that they won't have nuclear capabilities. And so right now it's buried and we're watching it. We know exactly what they have, and they know that. And they will either give it to us, which the president has laid out. They'll give it to us voluntarily. We'll get it. We'll take it. We'll take it out.
So I just want to remind people that under the Obama-era negotiated nuclear deal, Iran agreed to relinquish 97% of its enriched uranium stockpiles, 70% of its centrifuges. So we've declared victory. Are we, as the United States, in a better position now than we were after the approval of that deal under Obama?
Part of the JCPOA, you'll recall, a lot of critics were saying, well, we're delivering pallets of cash to the Iranians, you know, when we lifted or unfroze sanctions. Now the Iranians are saying, and again, we don't know if this is true or if this is going to be certified by any kind of bilateral agreement, but the Iranians are saying, actually, we're going to charge a levy for each tanker that we allow to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, the Iranians control the strait. That was not on the bingo card before this war started, right? The amount of money that they could potentially make just with that blockage of tankers that are held up there is something like $64 billion. Now, my question is, what are they going to do with that money? Are they going to maybe start rebuilding their missile capability? Are they going to use this to finance their proxies and project power? All of the military objectives that General Kane had laid out at the start of this war for the United States to achieve could very easily be undone simply by an economic windfall that we might accede to here.
Well, maybe a deal, because the president has suggested this. It's going to be some sort of joint venture of collecting money along the Strait of Hormuz between what were apparently, just 12 hours or so ago, enemies, the United States and Iran. What do you make of that?
So there's no legal basis for charging tolls to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. So the United States and Iran can agree to what they want, but there's no legal basis for it. So I can't expect the international community to accept it and go along with it. So it's essentially an attempt to monetize and to negotiate around international law, and I don't think it's going to succeed.
What are you going to be watching for, Michael, in the days to come, both from this administration and from Iran? Because again, you have both sides declaring victory, and Iran shows no signs of being cowed.
No. And if you talk to the Gulf states, they see no ceasefire in place, 12 hours or 20 hours later. I mean, the UAE, the Saudis have been pounded. Now, the question is this because of the lack of command and control? So, in other words, the IRGC is launching drones and missiles because they haven't gotten the memo that there's a ceasefire in place? Or is it that Iran now knows Donald Trump is desperate to call this whole thing off and, in fact, engage economically in a joint business venture with the IRGC such that they can humiliate and pound the UAE and the Saudis and the GCC countries with impunity, knowing that the United States will not retaliate? You heard Pete Hegseth today was talking about this war in the past tense. So all the optics from our side is it's all over but the shouting here, right? And the Iranians, I think, are going to take that. Whether or not it's an actual victory for them and that they have won this thing, they certainly believe that they have.
I want to go back into region with Associated Press's Isabel Debray from Beirut. So what can you tell us about this? And let me start with Israel saying this ceasefire doesn't apply to Lebanon. What can you tell us about what we know about what's happening on the ground?
There indeed were no signs of a ceasefire today in Beirut. Actually, it was the most intense day of the war since it started on March 2nd. And that's the war, of course, between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Hezbollah has held fire. We have seen that. But the Israeli military has announced a series of intense strikes over the last hours. And in Beirut, it was just scenes of chaos. Honestly, we were walking through the streets and there were just piles of cars that had burned. There were just entire apartment blocks that had been razed to the ground by these strikes. There's twisted metal everywhere, ambulances that were trying to make it through rush hour. Hospitals were calling on people to donate blood. The Lebanese health ministry is still counting the casualties, but really this does seem like one of the deadliest days of the war so far. Just in Beirut, over 80 people killed and over 700 wounded. So that death toll is likely to rise, we're told. And again, just really scenes that were sort of surreal as everyone in the region was talking about this ceasefire, just seeing this destruction in Beirut. And also important to mention that we're not just talking about areas on the outskirts of Beirut that have already been evacuated, that Israel has repeatedly warned people to leave. These are areas really in central Beirut, densely packed commercial residential areas that have previously been spared from a lot of that violence. So really shocking to be here on that day.
Thank you so much for that, Isabel Debray. So, Adil, let me close up with this question, which is obviously in the Middle East, the violence continues. But the justification for this, or one of the justifications, was to get rid of nuclear capabilities, to make the United States of America safer, that this was a matter of national security. Today, is the U.S. safer than it was when this war began?
No, I think that it's pretty clear that there was a negotiated settlement to be had with Iran. It's not clear whether the deals are going to be more favorable after this extremely bloody and destructive war. So it does seem that we've killed around 1,700 civilians and achieved nothing and not really improved our national security in any way. We've created more enemies, more instability, damaged our economy and the economy of the region, and really have nothing to show for it. And again, the conflict is not necessarily over. We have to wait and see if the bloodshed will finally end.